Can Formula One handle an 11th team? Welcome back to F1 Sparks, where you get your dose of spark from the F1 world. For those of you who watched the British Grand Prix last weekend, you will have spotted an unusual sight on the F1 pit lane, for there was an 11th team amongst the likes of Ferrari, Red Bull and Mercedes. Silverstone played host not only to a Formula One race, but also a movie set as Brad Pitt's next venture began filming. The APX GP team arrives. News of a Formula One-inspired movie starring Brad Pitt was revealed in 2022, and along with Pitt's attachment to the film, the studio was hoping to create the most realistic depiction of the sport ever by drafting in 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton as a producer. The Mercedes man has been working closely with Pitt and the film crew, and in Silverstone we got our first proper glimpse at the project. A picture of Pitt playing his character, Sonny Hayes, appeared above one of the garages in the Silverstone pit lane, and the film crew also had its own paddock area to fit in with the real teams. The purpose of them being there was to capture some images of the Formula 2 car that has been redesigned to look like an F1 car for the film going around the iconic track. The car lined up at the back of the grid ahead of Sunday's race, and Pitt also stood alongside the actual drivers as the national anthem was sung with a movie camera filming him. Throughout the weekend, there was a huge amount of intrigue, with images surfacing of everything from the mechanics in their APX GP overalls, to the pit wall, to the car inside the garage, as the world was fascinated by this ambitious project. It was not just outside of the paddock either that there were some keen eyes, but also inside, with plenty of the teams pleased to see their sport get the attention it deserves. Mercedes boss Toto Wolff described their setup as really unbelievable, and revealed his team have been involved with putting Pitt through his paces. He said, "We've been involved pretty early. When we had the first discussions, we sent Brad to a driving school in France, going through the Formula cars from Formula 4 all the way up. We tried to be helpful with the narrative," he continues. Lewis is an executive producer, so he wanted to make sure when the movie comes out, it's as realistic as possible. "We had a few laughs, but I think it's a very good narrative, and the effort they've put in, we helped them. It was Fred Vasseur's idea, I think, to use an F2 car and build the bodywork around it so it looks like an F1 car. And then the garages and the pit wall, all of it. We tried to be helpful and give them the designs so they could be as realistic as possible. You see now, that is such an effort. I spoke to the director a few weeks ago and said, 'Where are you?' expecting him to tell me he's in Hollywood, but he said, 'I'm in my apartment in Brackley.' So it's not all great with being a movie director, but yeah, massive. When you go in the garage and the whole setup they have behind it, really unbelievable. It seems everyone was on board with them being in the paddock, but it does raise another question. If teams are happy to see a fictional 11th outfit, why are they pushing against the idea of a real one? The rush to be F1's 11th team. 10 years ago, it didn't take much to get onto the grid. In 2015, Renault paid just £1 to buy the failing Lotus F1 team, and the newest entrant Haas were able to purchase the former factory of Marussia when they were setting up their team. But in 2023, everything has changed, not to mention the bank balances. Having survived COVID, the popularity of Formula One exploded and money started pouring into the sport. The days of a team struggling to stay afloat seemed a thing of the past, and now anyone who is anyone was looking for a way onto the grid. The most visible of them is Andretti, who have been trying to secure a spot since as early as 2021, but have hit brick wall after brick wall. They, along with potential entries from all over the world, are awaiting the results of the FIA's expression of interest process, which was established at the start of the year to assess any new entries. If they do get the nod of approval from the FIA, that is only the first step on their journey, as they have the much tougher task of convincing the teams and Formula One's management group. Why are the current F1 teams fighting back? Andretti have found their bid going nowhere, and that's largely due to almost universal pushback from the existing teams, and their grievances can all be boiled down to one thing: money. The way Formula One works is the sport generates money every year that goes directly to F1, and then at the end of the year, a portion of the money is distributed to the teams according to their finishing positions. Finish first and you'll receive the most, while those at the bottom will find their wallets a little lighter. But that's not the only money the teams receive, for they also get a percentage of the revenue generated by the championship, and crucially, this is shared equally among the 10 teams. Think of it as a big pie, with each team taking an equal portion. Now, F1 teams' problem is they say that if you add an 11th outfit, you make that portion shorter in order to accommodate handing out money even more ways. People like Toto Wolff have argued that unless a team brings enough value to the sport, that means the existing outfits will have to take a cut in their earnings, something none of them will want to do. But could there also be another reason why an 11th team is not feasible? The real problem with an 11th team. 10 teams in Formula One is certainly not set in stone. In 2011, a total of 12 teams raced, meaning there were 24 cars lining up on a Grand Prix weekend. The current order was established midway through the 2017 campaign when Racing Point purchased Force India, and although some teams have changed names since then, they remain the same companies behind them. The F1 grid is capped at 12 teams under the current Concord Agreement. The commercial contract teams agree with F1, which runs to the end of the 2025 season. But there could be another reason why it's unlikely the sport will ever return to that number. Liberty Media CEO Greg Maffei conceded the real problem with adding an 11th Formula One team is the lack of space in some paddock areas on the calendar. Speaking on the Walker webcast, Maffei explained, the real problem is the way the structure works today. There are probably 4 or 5 garages, paddock areas where that would be difficult to put in an 11th bay. Maybe that's solvable with money and time, but it's not something you snap your fingers and solve. Formula One's calendar is a mixture of shiny new circuits and old historic tracks. And while some of the most historic tracks, such as Silverstone, have been refurbished, there are plenty that haven't. Take Monza in Italy, for example. That hosted the final race in the first ever year of F1, but nowadays the pit lane is one of the smaller ones and teams will find themselves rubbing shoulders with each other. But that's nothing compared to Monaco. While Silverstone is an iconic Formula One venue, the movie producers would surely have liked to get some shots of pit in Monaco, but the reality is they simply couldn't do it. The street circuit has the tightest paddock and pit lane of them all, with the teams unable to even reverse their trucks in to drop off equipment. While team principals usually sit on the pit wall, in Monaco they're forced to sit high above the garages themselves. While Monaco could accommodate more than 10 teams in the past, Formula One has grown a lot since then. Not only in terms of personnel, but also the cars themselves. The cars are wider and longer than ever before, meaning it can be a real challenge to not only race in Monaco, but also to navigate the tight street circuit. And before, when a team used to have 7 personnel inside a garage, that number is now closer to 100. Monaco is one of many circuits where Formula One is already pushing limits to the brink in terms of infrastructure alone. An 11th team may be the straw that breaks the camel's back. As always, thanks for watching today's video, and let us know in the comments if you think we will soon have an 11th F1 team on the track. In the meantime, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss a release here on F1 Sparks.